I'm Leland. My family didn't just lie to me. They waited. They watched. And when the time was right, they set the trap. I was about to step into my car until my niece grabbed my hand and whispered, "Uncle, don't get in. They said it'll explode." She was only 10, but she knew. She heard everything. Because they never thought she understood Chinese. What came next didn't just expose betrayal. It set fire to everything we thought was family. But if your own sister tries to kill you, what part of you still hopes she's lying? The sun was barely over the skyline, and the air outside the Quan Holdings building felt crisp, sharper than usual. The kind of cold that cut through your suit jacket and reminded you fall had quietly arrived in San Francisco. I stood still in the plaza, eyes fixed on the glass tower I once helped build, literally and figuratively. People milled around the small stage set up outside. Lattes in hand, laughter echoing, name tags flashing under sunlight. We were here to celebrate the launch of our new tech division, a day Seraphine had hyped up for weeks. She stood under the spotlight delivering her speech with all the poise and charm expected of the CEO. My sister looked untouchable in that tailored navy suit, her hair swept back, her voice clear and calculated. Cameras flashed. Applause rolled like obedient thunder. And on the screen behind her, the names of the founding team rotated in elegant white font. Except mine. There it was. No Leland, just Seraphine, and a curated lineup of names picked for PR. I felt my jaw tense, but I kept the smile. Small, polite, practiced. The kind you give when your insides feel like they've slipped into ice water. The coffee cup in my hand trembled just enough for the surface to ripple. Maylene saw it. My 7-year-old niece stood beside me, clutching her stuffed rabbit like she always did when the world felt too big. Her eyes flicked from the cup to my face. "You okay, Uncle?" she whispered. "I'm fine," I replied. That was the Quan family answer to everything. "I'm fine. Always." Seraphine wrapped up her speech. Her smile scanned the crowd, brushed past me like I was a stranger, and landed on a venture capitalist with too much gel in his hair. She stepped down. Her security detail tightened formation immediately, murmuring in Mandarin, just low enough to be polite, just loud enough to be unsettling. I caught a few words. Quanzhou, Chengshu, Wancheng. Keep watch. Sequence. Execute. But I brushed it off. Logistics, probably. Always something happening behind the scenes. Always some plan I wasn't told about. As I turned toward the parking lot, ready to call it a day, I felt a tug at my sleeve, Maylene. Her small hand gripped mine, eyes wide, her voice barely above a whisper. "Uncle, don't get in the car." I stopped. "What did you say?" "They said it'll explode." Her lips trembled. "And they said no one will ever know." I crouched down to meet her eyes. "Who said that, sweetie?" She looked over her shoulder, then leaned in close. "The guards. I heard them. They didn't know I was there. One of them said, after he starts the car, there'll be noise. Then chaos." I looked toward the black SUV parked across the plaza. Sanchez, my driver, wasn't there yet. The bodyguards were by the side, quiet, looking anywhere but at me. Something shifted in my gut. I knew better than to panic. Fear doesn't win in my family. It's seen as weakness, and weakness gets buried. I pulled out my phone, texted Sanchez. "Hold. Meet at side entrance. Quiet." Maylene squeezed my hand tighter. Her fingers were cold. I forced a smile and knelt. "You're so brave to tell me. Listen, stay right here, all right? Don't move. I'll be right back." She nodded, her bunny clutched like armor. I rose, heart thudding, and walked slowly toward the edge of the plaza. I could feel eyes on my back. Seraphine was talking again, this time to one of the guards, her tone low but firm. She saw me looking. Her face didn't flinch, but the corners of her lips twitched. A rehearsed smile, too quick to be real. My breath hitched. That smile didn't belong to the sister I grew up with. That smile belonged to someone who had decided I was a liability. Sanchez appeared at the far end of the lot, nodding once. Professional, calm, no questions asked. That's why I trusted him. As he moved toward the car, I took one last look at Maylene, still frozen near the fountain, small and scared and trying to be strong. Then it happened. A click. Small, sharp, deliberate, and somehow louder than the crowd, louder than the applause, louder than the wind. I didn't move, every nerve in my body locked. The sound was small, but it froze the world around me. It wasn't loud, it didn't echo off the walls, but the weight it carried dropped into my chest like a stone into deep water. Sanchez stopped mid-step, one foot slightly off the ground. His eyes flicked toward mine, and I knew. He'd heard it too. The guards turned at once, just a little too fast. No confusion, no questions, just rehearsed awareness. Then I saw her. Seraphine. Still poised, still perfectly balanced in those heels, but her expression twitched, just for a moment. A smile that faltered so subtly it might have gone unnoticed to anyone else. But I knew her. That glitch in her calm told me more than any words ever could. They planned this. Every molecule in my body told me the truth. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition, something I'd honed in boardrooms where silence could kill deals and hesitation could kill futures. Sanchez looked at me. I gave him a tiny nod, barely a tilt of my head. He understood. He moved toward the car, posture relaxed as if nothing was wrong. I watched him place a hand on the hood, then another. He glanced under it like he'd done it 100 times, like a man just checking a filter or a coolant line. But I saw his left hand tighten. He was buying us time. Behind me, Malin tugged at my coat again. "Uncle," she whispered, "I'm scared." I knelt beside her and met her eyes. "You did the right thing, sweetheart. You're so brave." I meant it. She was braver than half the people I'd gone to war with in business. She listened when it mattered most. A bead of sweat slipped down my back. Seconds crawled. Sanchez stood upright slowly, face pale, lips barely moving as he mouthed a single word. "Device." My stomach dropped. A buzzing filled my ears. My own heartbeat suddenly too loud, drumming in my throat and my head behind my eyes. I grabbed Maylene gently by the shoulders. "Step back with me. Slowly. Just like we're playing a game." "Okay?" She nodded, eyes wide, trusting. We inched backward, one step at a time. Then I heard heels clicking on the pavement behind me. Seraphine, her tone was polished, laced with faux concern. "Is everything all right, Leland?" I turned halfway, keeping Maylene close to my side. My sister's voice was smooth, but her eyes weren't on me. They were on the car. A flicker of anticipation, or maybe fear. It was hard to tell. I smiled. God help me, I smiled. "Routine check. You know how Sanchez is. Always a little paranoid about engine noise." She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Better safe than sorry." I wanted to grab her by the collar and scream, ask her what the hell happened to family, ask her when she decided my life was worth so little. But I didn't, because I wasn't stupid. Not anymore. If I confronted her here, I wouldn't leave the plaza. The walls had ears, and the ears had hands and guns. Another SUV pulled up quietly. 4 more men in dark suits stepped out, spreading into the area like shadows. Reinforcements, apparently. For a tech product launch. Please, these weren't bodyguards, but these were handlers. I took note of the way they communicated. Chin lifts, palm brushes, no words. Coordinated, dangerous. This wasn't a bluff. This wasn't a scare tactic. This was real. Malin's hand found mine again. "Uncle, are we going home now?" I nodded, but not too fast. "Soon," I said, but not the same way. I lifted her into my arms and walked toward the side exit, my face calm, my movements unhurried. Behind me, Sanchez pulled out his phone and began muttering into it. Nothing urgent, just enough to look like he was reporting to someone. We both knew what this was. Theater. Everything now depended on appearances. No fear, no haste. As I reached the glass doors, the city noise returned like a wave. Cars, voices, the sound of life moving on as if nothing had just tried to kill me. Then I heard her. "Leland, wait!" I stopped. My hands instinctively tightened around Maylene's back. I turned. Seraphine was there, closer now. Smile soft, posture casual, almost maternal, and that's what terrified me more than anything else. "You forgot something," she said, raising her hand. In her fingers, the key fob to my car. Her eyes held mine a moment longer than they should have, like she was daring me to call her bluff. Her smile was perfect, too perfect for someone who almost killed me. I didn't take the key fob, not immediately. I just stood there, Maylene in my arms, watching the way Seraphine extended it like a gift. Her fingers didn't tremble, her voice didn't crack. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed she was being thoughtful. But I did know better. And now, I couldn't unknow it. I gave her the same smile she gave me. Pleasant, empty, layered. Thanks, I said, and took it. The weight of it felt unnatural. Cold metal, plastic casing. Ordinary on the outside, but now a symbol, a reminder. She wanted me to remember who had the power. Sanchez opened the building door behind me, his posture steady, unreadable, as always. I stepped through, Maylene still clutching my shirt, and didn't look back, not even when the door closed between us and her. By the time we reached the elevator, my hands had started to shake again. We rode up in silence. Inside the penthouse, the city lay stretched beyond the windows, glittering like it didn't know betrayal. The bay shimmered under the weight of the coming night. Lights blinked across the water, boats gliding like shadows. It should have calmed me. It didn't. I locked the door, bolted it, then stood there for a moment longer, hand still on the knob, listening. Nothing. But silence now no longer meant peace. It meant something was hiding. Sanchez stayed in the building's lobby, said he was following up on a call, but we both knew he was watching the entrance, keeping score, measuring footsteps. Maylin curled up on the couch, her cartoons playing low on the screen. But her eyes weren't watching the animation. They kept drifting to me, checking if I was okay. I placed the key fob gently on the kitchen table. It caught the light and winked at me. How long had she been planning this? I sat down across from it, stared. The same way someone stares at an old photo right before they burn it. Control. That's what it was about. That's all it ever was. I whispered under my breath. How long have I been this blind? Maylene yawned quietly. I pulled a blanket over her shoulders and kissed the top of her head. Then I sank into the armchair and let my mind drag me backward. Back to childhood. Seraphine always led the way. The golden child. The voice in every room. The applause always followed her footsteps. And I was the quiet one. The helper. The shadow. But once, just once, my father had pulled me aside and said, "You see clearer than she does, but never show it." At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Now I realize it was a warning. He gave her the throne, but gave me the clarity. And clarity, without voice, is a curse. When he died, there was no battle. I didn't contest her takeover, didn't argue the board's decision. I nodded, played the role of loyal brother. Maybe that was my biggest mistake, because silence isn't loyalty, it's surrender. A soft knock at the door broke the memory. I checked the time, too late for anyone to be dropping by. My body went still. I walked to the camera panel. Sanchez stood there, but he wasn't alone. The man beside him wore a dark suit, no ID badge. He looked like he belonged, and that was the most dangerous kind of man. Sanchez didn't look at the camera, just nodded once, a small signal. I opened the door slowly. "Evening," the man said. "Corporate security, just a routine check on the building's footage. We've had anomalies. Wouldn't want anything slipping through." His voice, familiar. He'd been one of the guards outside the event. I remembered the cadence, the way he clipped his consonants. Maylene's grip on my leg confirmed it. "That's him," she whispered. "He said the thing about the noise." I kept my expression neutral. "Of course." "Come in." They stepped in like they owned the space. While they moved through the hallway, pretending to scan camera feeds, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. A message from Sanchez. "Not real. Get out. Now." My hand gripped the edge of the counter. Maylene stared up at me, her bear crushed in her arms. She didn't cry, didn't whimper, just waited, like she'd learned too early that panic was a luxury. I nodded to her and whispered, "It's okay." But I didn't believe it. I glanced toward the back of the apartment. There was a private stairwell leading to the service elevator. Not many knew it existed. I texted Sanchez one word, "Stall." He responded instantly, "Copy." Maylene and I moved slowly toward the back hallway. I kept my tone light, like we were just going to brush teeth before bed. But halfway there, I heard it, not loud, but unmistakable. One of the men, not realizing I was still within earshot, spoke low to the other. "Boss said to leave no loose ends." I stopped walking. No loose ends. That meant us. That meant now. Then it came again. That sound. The click. Just like in the plaza. Just like before everything started unraveling. But this time, it wasn't just fear crawling up my spine. It was the realization that this wasn't fear anymore. It was war. That click, the same sound as before, reminded me this wasn't fear anymore. It was war. I didn't wait. I shoved Malin behind the marble column near the kitchen island. Her small hands grasped the hem of my jacket, but she didn't make a sound. Good girl. Sanchez met my eyes from across the room. That one look between us, sharpened over years of working together, was all it took. He moved first. The taller of the two imposters stepped to the right, feigning a sweep of the hallway. His fingers hovered too long near his jacket. "We're just checking exits, sir," he said, voice cool and polite. "Then you'll understand," I said, steady as I could manage, "why I prefer you leave, now." A pause, then came the shift. A subtle flinch from one, the tightening of a jaw from the other. That moment before movement, when the air itself tenses. Sanchez lunged. He crashed into the nearest one with a force that knocked them both into the dining table, sending a bowl of fruit tumbling. A gun slid across the hardwood floor. Too loud, too real. I grabbed Maylene and ran. The elevator was closer, but the second man stepped between us, and no time to think. I yanked open the stairwell door, slammed the emergency bar. The alarm wailed, red lights flashing across the hall. That sound, shrill, ugly. It tore through the quiet like a blade. Malin pressed her face into my chest as we descended the first flight, her breath hot and quick against my shirt. "It's okay," I whispered, more to myself than to her. On the 12th floor landing, the stairwell door swung open behind us. I turned, fists clenched, but it was Sanchez. He stumbled, shoulder bleeding, but eyes focused. "They're not cops," he hissed, "and we can't go to the police either. They're on her payroll. I've seen the transfers. Names I trusted. All bought." My stomach clenched. San Francisco was her city now. Bought with boardroom smiles and backroom checks. We moved faster. Outside, the rain had started. It slicked the narrow alley behind our building, pooled under the street lamps, blurred the skyline. We didn't wait for a cab, didn't risk a car. We ran. The warehouse sat in a forgotten part of the dockside district, a place Father once used for import logistics before the tech boom. It hadn't seen real use in years, not since everything became digital, but he'd never sold it, said it was a place worth holding on to. Now I knew why. Inside, the scent of rust and memory hung in the air, oil-stained concrete, crates stacked like ghosts. A single dangling bulb flickered above a dusty desk. We locked the door, pulled down a steel bar across it for good measure. Only then did I let go of Maylene. Only then did I sit on the same crate I used to play on when I was 10. And then the weight hit. I bent forward, head in my hands. "Why, Seraphine?" I muttered. "What did I ever take from you?" Sanchez rifled through the drawers, found a faded folder. "Look at this!" Inside were statements, bank transfers, shell companies, quiet purchases made through proxies. My name, once listed on all official documents as co-founder, was scrubbed clean, as if I'd never existed. My jaw clenched. "She's been planning this for years," he said. "Since before your father passed." "She waited until no one could stop her," I replied. My voice was hoarse. I looked over at Malin. She sat cross-legged on a dusty rug, bare in her lap, watching us both. Her innocence was the only thing left untainted in the room. Then she asked quietly, "Uncle, are we bad people?" I couldn't speak for a second. "No," I said, steadying myself. "We're just quiet, and quiet people scare loud ones." She smiled, just a little, enough to keep me breathing. That line stuck with me. It rang true in a way I hadn't realized before. Maybe silence hadn't been my weakness. Maybe it was the one thing Seraphine couldn't control, and now she was trying to silence me permanently. I stood. "We need to find a way to expose her." "Without tipping her off?" Sanchez said. "That's not going to be easy. She's not God. She makes mistakes. We just have to catch one." Before he could answer, a phone vibrated on the desk. Not mine, not Sanchez's. An old landline handset still plugged into the wall. I hadn't even noticed it before. It buzzed again. We froze. I picked it up, just held it for a second, then answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then her voice, smooth, serene. "You should have stayed in your lane, little brother." I didn't say a word. "You had your place. You had your name on the building. But no, you had to look deeper. Now you've made it personal. The line went dead. I didn't move for several seconds. Then I set the phone down gently like it might explode too. Sanchez exhaled. She knows where we are. She always did, I said. Her words didn't scare me. They clarified everything. When I hung up that phone, something inside me snapped. Not in anger, not in panic, but in understanding. There was no turning back now. The rules we were raised with, family first, protect the legacy, keep the peace, they didn't apply anymore. Not when peace had been turned into a weapon. The first pale light of dawn crept through the cracks in the warehouse windows. A soft mist hovered over the Embarcadero. The world outside was just waking up. I hadn't slept. I sat on the concrete floor, back against a stack of crates. Maylene was curled up on a ragged sofa nearby, her little bear tucked under her chin. Her chest rose and fell with steady breaths. I envied that kind of peace. The silence around us wasn't restful. It was loaded. Every sound, the creak of metal, the shift of the wind, felt amplified. I whispered, mostly to myself. Silence made me weak. I used to believe quiet meant strength. But now I saw what it really did. It made room for others to rewrite the story, erase my name, fill the silence with their own power. The door creaked. I reached instinctively for the wrench I'd found earlier, but relaxed when Sanchez stepped in. Rain streaked down his jacket. He carried a paper bag and a small plastic case. Coffee, he said, tossing me a bottle. Burner phones. And this. He held up a flash drive. My hand tightened around the plastic before I even realized it. Where'd you get it? An old friend in maintenance. Still loyal to your father. We found an old laptop in the office corner. It barely booted, but it worked. Sanchez plugged in the drive. The footage was grainy, black and white, and time-stamped, just 30 minutes before the company event yesterday. There, clear as day. 2 guards kneeling by my car, tools in hand. Then, Seraphine. She walked into frame like she was stepping onto a stage. Not hurried, not anxious. She glanced at the men, then gave a single nod. No words, no theatrics. She walked out of frame. The men continued working. My fingers twitched over the pause key. She didn't even look around, I said. She didn't have to, Sanchez murmured. She knew no one would stop her. I watched the clip again, then a third time. With each replay, something hardened in me. The last shred of doubt, the sliver of hope that maybe this was someone else's doing, was gone. She's been planning this for months. I leaned back, chest burning. I wasn't shaking from fear, not anymore. It was fury. The little brother in me, the one who idolized her, who followed her lead, who stayed in the background to keep the peace, wanted to believe there was still a way to fix this, to talk it through, to find a middle ground. But the man in me, the one who'd nearly died in a staged explosion, whose niece had to whisper warnings instead of laughing at cartoons, knew better. Forgiveness now would just be surrender in nicer clothes. Sanchez sat beside me, his breath steady. What's your move? I stared ahead, letting the question hang in the air. I'm not sure yet, I said, but I was. While Maylene slept, I used one of the burner phones to call a number I hadn't dialed in years. Diana Cho. Her voice hadn't changed. It's Leland. A pause. Well, I never thought I'd hear from you again. I have something, I said. Evidence, footage, documents. What kind? The kind that makes people resign or disappear. Another pause. If this is about your sister, it is. Leland, you know what you're inviting. So was silence, I said. She didn't speak for a few seconds. Then, Pier 47, tonight, after dark. I ended the call before I could second-guess it. My thoughts drifted. Uninvited, a memory returned. Father's funeral. Seraphine had stood at the podium in black, her voice steady, her speech about loyalty above all, praised by every board member and investor in the room. I had believed her, every word. But those same words now rang hollow. Loyalty without truth wasn't noble. It was bondage. I sat at the desk, pulled a faded invoice from a drawer, and flipped it over. I started writing. To Maylene, I scrawled. If you ever wonder why I did this, it's because I finally remembered who I was. You reminded me. Quiet isn't weak. It just means we listen before we move. I didn't finish it. Not yet. The air inside the warehouse had grown warmer with the sun's slow rise. Maylene stirred but didn't wake. Sanchez stepped outside, saying he needed a break. The door creaked shut behind him. 2 minutes passed. Then I heard it. Tires screeching. I bolted to my feet and rushed out the side entrance. The alley was empty except for a broken cup and his phone. It lay face down on the wet pavement. The screen cracked, a call still active. I picked it up. Hello? Silence. Then, you really think you can win, Leland? Seraphine. Her voice, once composed, was now thin, tight, but it wasn't taunting. It wasn't smug. It was trembling. Not mine. Hers. Seraphine's voice, once so calculated it could slice glass, now carried the unmistakable tremor of someone who'd lost grip of the game board. And that, more than any threat, told me we were no longer playing by her rules. I stood there in the alley, Sanchez's cracked phone still warm in my hand, listening to the dead silence on the other end. She'd hung up. Or maybe she couldn't bear to hear what I'd say next. By the time I reached the docks at Pier 47, the fog had already swallowed most of the waterline. Early morning had a strange stillness in San Francisco, like the city was holding its breath before the day began. The only sounds were distant seagulls and the groan of dock ropes straining with the tide. The sky was a pale bruise. I paced near the edge, trying to stay in the open but far from sightlines. I'd worn a dark hoodie, pulled low, not because I wanted to hide, but because I knew who might be watching. Sanchez's car had been found abandoned just 2 hours earlier near the Marina Green. No blood, no broken glass, no footprints, just a silent message. We could have taken him, but didn't. Hope or threat, I couldn't decide. Then my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I hesitated for a beat, then answered. Leland. Diana's voice came through, shaky and hurried. Leland, they hit my office last night. I closed my eyes. What did they take? Everything. The flash drive, backup files. Even the damn security cameras were wiped. They knew exactly where to look. I clenched the metal railing. Then we go public without the files. She scoffed, frustrated. And get sued into oblivion. That's what they want. No proof, no story. Just you sounding like a bitter brother with a vendetta. I didn't answer right away. Then, we tell the truth anyway. You really believe that'll be enough? No, I said quietly. But I'm done letting silence protect them. A long pause. Then she whispered, Be careful, Leland. They're not just cleaning up. They're preparing for something. I ended the call and slid the phone into my pocket. I stood for a while longer, breathing in the sea air, remembering. The night Father died, I hadn't been there. The official story was heart failure. Natural. Quiet. But I'd always wondered why the oxygen monitor had flatlined right after Seraphine came back into the room. I told myself suspicion was just guilt's twin, but that suspicion was no longer alone. It had company now. Logic, evidence, memory. For all her ambition, Seraphine had only ever been protected by fear. Ours. The board's. The staff's. Mine. But fear was shifting. And so was power. I heard her before I saw her. Designer heels on damp wood. I turned. Seraphine walked through the mist like a ghost dressed for a gala. Tailored coat, flawless lipstick, but her eyes told the truth. Red-rimmed, restless, brittle. You're making a mess, she said quietly. No, I replied. You already did. She stopped a few feet away. Her chin lifted slightly. Habit, reflex, the performance of authority. You think people will believe you over me, she said. You've always been the silent one, the background brother. I built this empire. You were just lucky to be born into it. I smiled. Exactly. They underestimated the one who watched. Her mouth twitched. You think silence makes you powerful now? It always did, I said. Because silence remembers everything. Then I pulled out my phone. Live video feed. A shadowed room. Sanchez, bruised but standing, stared into the camera. He held up a drive in his hand, copies of the files we thought were lost. Seraphine froze. I didn't fight you with lawyers, or bodyguards, or press releases, I said. I fought you with memory, and it turns out that's the one thing you forgot to erase. She didn't speak. Just stood there, trapped between the story she'd built and the one unraveling beneath her. Finally, her voice broke. This isn't over. I took a step forward. It never is. And then, a sound cut through the fog. Sharp, unfamiliar. A car door slammed shut behind the warehouse. We both turned. Uncle? A small voice called. My heart seized. Maylene. She stepped into view from the far end of the dock, wearing the same jacket I'd left draped over the couch hours earlier. Her eyes searched the fog for me. Seraphine's face changed, pure confusion bleeding into something darker. I didn't bring her, she said. For the first time since this all began, I saw fear bloom behind her eyes. That's when I knew. The real trap hadn't been set for me, or her. It was for both of us. That single thought cut through the fog thicker than the morning air. This wasn't a game anymore. It never had been. And as Malin's voice echoed across the dock, I knew the rules had changed. We moved quickly. I scooped Malin into my arms, her breath hitching as I whispered, hold on to me, no matter what. I glanced at Seraphine, her face unreadable now, all sharp edges dulled by confusion or fear, maybe both. We didn't speak as we climbed into my car. The GPS ping from Malin's smartwatch was faint but steady, pointing north toward the coastline to a place I hadn't set foot in since the funeral, the Quan Estate. 20 minutes later, we reached the wrought iron gates. Rust had crept into the metalwork. Moss clung to the stones. Time had tried to erase it, but the estate still stood, like a bitter monument to everything we'd buried in the name of family. Maylin shifted in her seat. Why are we here? I didn't answer. Seraphine did. Our past lives here, she said flatly. The mansion loomed ahead, silent but watching. We entered through the side door. My old key still worked. That alone sent a chill through me. The inside smelled of damp wood, old betrayal, and too many things unsaid. The chandeliers still hung, but the dust was thicker than I remembered. Paint peeled along the hallway. The silence had weight to it. I followed the signal to the west wing, toward the library. That room was once my father's sanctuary. Now it felt like a tomb. Maylene sat huddled beneath the stained glass window, her bare clutched to her chest. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and I dropped to my knees, wrapping her tight in my arms. They said if I screamed, they'd hurt you, she whispered. I brushed her hair back, calming her with my voice. Who said that? She pointed toward the fireplace. An old family photo still hung there. Our father, younger and proud, standing next to a man I hadn't thought about in years, Wei Lin, his former partner, his oldest friend, and the one person father stopped mentioning after the scandal. Seraphine paled. He's dead. He's been dead for a decade. I stepped closer. The photo frame was slightly crooked, fresh fingerprints on the glass. I lifted it. Behind it, a wall safe sat half open, the metal edges still warm from recent tampering. Inside, papers, yellowed but intact, contracts, bank records, and at the very back, sealed in a plastic envelope, was Father's will. I unfolded it slowly. My hands didn't shake. The signature was real. The date, 2 months before his death. And the content? It didn't name Seraphine. It named me, the quiet one, the observer, the forgotten son. Seraphine staggered back, nearly collapsing onto the armchair. Her voice broke. He changed it. He changed everything. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't shout, it just stands still and waits. But that stillness shattered seconds later. A loud blare erupted through the estate, shrill, mechanical, urgent. Red lights pulsed along the hallway. Steel shutters slammed down over the windows with a metallic thud. Motion sensors, I muttered. Seraphine gasped. No one's been here in years. Then the overhead speakers crackled to life. The voice was male, calm, cold. You've both taken what doesn't belong to you. Now you'll pay the same price your father did. My spine stiffened. Seraphine whispered, Marcus? It couldn't be. Marcus Lynn, I said under my breath. He's supposed to be locked up. Seraphine didn't meet my eyes. We paid off his silence after the trial. I didn't know he got out. Of course she didn't. A countdown timer lit up on the far wall. 3 minutes. Maylene gripped my sleeve. Uncle. Seraphine was frozen again, lips parted, breath uneven. I never meant for this, she said. Then help me fix it, I snapped, pulling her toward the central control panel. She shook herself free from her daze and started typing, muttering a stream of commands in Mandarin. I knelt beside her, pulling wires from the casing, fingers flying as I spliced and stripped lines. Sparks flared. Something shorted out. 2:15. 2 Unkao. The floor vibrated slightly, a low rumble beneath our feet. Maylin whimpered, and I grabbed her hand, locking eyes with her. You stay with me, you hear me, no matter what. The room was stifling now, the air thick with heat and static. 1:30. Seraphine shouted, The system's not accepting overrides. It's locked remotely. I growled under my breath. Then we stopped the relay. I yanked another wire. This one hissed. Another timer began blinking erratically. It bought us seconds, but not much more. I turned to Seraphine. We get out through the basement tunnel. Now. She didn't argue. We sprinted, Maylene in my arms, Seraphine close behind, down the back stairwell, past portraits of people who no longer felt like family. 30 seconds. We reached the tunnel door. I shoved it open, just as a deafening boom shattered the hallway behind us. Fire bloomed in the distance, the old wood catching fast. Smoke rolled down the corridor like a living thing. Another explosion rocked the ceiling. Dust rained down. I pushed Seraphine ahead, Maylene still wrapped around my neck. My legs screamed, lungs burned, but I didn't stop. Another crack, wood splintering. A chandelier crashed behind us, flames chasing our heels. We burst out the tunnel's exit, into the coastal wind. I collapsed onto the wet grass. Maylene was crying, but breathing. I pulled her into me. Behind us, the mansion groaned, then gave way. Stone, wood, fire, legacy, gone. Through the black smoke, I heard her voice. Leland. But I couldn't see her. Only Maylene's small hand tugged at my sleeve, guiding me toward the light. I followed her, stumbling into the pale morning air, the cliffs behind us shrouded in smoke and the bitter smell of ash. My knees buckled as we reached the grassy slope just beyond the estate. I collapsed, not from injury but exhaustion. Every muscle in my body screamed, but my mind refused to shut off. The Quan estate, what was left of it, burned behind us, swallowed by flame and history. Walls caved in, and the roof had already collapsed. The mansion that once held generations of power and pride now looked like nothing more than broken stone and forgotten memory. Beside me, Maylene sat breathing heavily, her face smudged with soot and streaked with tears, but alive. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, searching for something I wasn't sure I could give. A cough broke the silence. I turned. Seraphine. She was pinned beneath part of the collapsed veranda, her arm twisted awkwardly under the weight of charred wood and metal. I dragged myself to her without thinking, adrenaline surging one last time. The beams burned my palms, but I pried them off anyway. When I finally pulled her free, she groaned but didn't resist. Gone was the perfectly curated image. Her hair matted, makeup streaked, blood mixing with soot. She looked human, wounded, frail, and finally real. Why? I whispered. She didn't answer right away. Her lips trembled as if the words had to claw their way out. Because I was afraid, she said, voice raw. Afraid that you'd take everything and leave me with nothing, just like he did. You already did that, I said, almost gently. For a moment, she looked like the older sister I used to follow around, back when none of this had poisoned us. And maybe that flicker of memory was why I didn't leave her there. Sirens wailed in the distance, closer now. First responders were coming. Seraphine tried to sit up, wincing. You can walk, I said, barely, but she nodded. I glanced at Maylene. She stood watching, quiet as always, holding onto her bear with a white-knuckled grip. I could have left Seraphine, let the law deal with her, let the world decide her worth. But Maylene was watching, and she would remember. So I took Seraphine's hand and placed it in mine. You'll live, I told her, but you'll have to live with it. Tears slipped down her face, cutting clean lines through soot and blood. I'm sorry, Leland. I leaned closer and whispered, Don't say sorry. Say my name when they ask who saved you. Paramedics arrived just minutes later. One of them led Maylin to an ambulance while another rushed to Seraphine. I let them take over. I had nothing left to give. Standing on the edge of the cliff, the Pacific spread out below me, gray, cold, endless. The wind hit my skin like truth. Sharp, honest. That house was gone. But not everything burned. Through the smoke, I saw him, Sanchez, alive, barely. He was strapped to a stretcher, one arm in a sling, his face battered but unmistakably grinning as our eyes met. "You're a hard man to kill," I muttered under my breath. He gave me a thumbs up, then promptly passed out. A paramedic leaned over him. He disabled half the explosive line. "Bought you time." I nodded, throat tight. That man saved us. And somehow, that felt more like family than anything Seraphine and I ever shared. Later, as the sun rose higher and the fire crew started hosing down what remained, I sat on the bumper of a fire truck with Maylin curled beside me. She held my hand like she had that first day, back when she told me not to get in the car. I remembered her eyes then, how serious they were, how instinct had spoken before reason had the chance. She looked up at me now, her voice a whisper. "You saw it this time." I squeezed her fingers gently. "Next time, I'll be the one who sees first." She nodded, as if that settled everything. A reporter broke through the barrier, cameras flashing behind him. "Mr. Kwan, Leland Kwan, do you have a comment on the Kwan Holdings scandal? Is it true your sister—" I stood slowly, adjusting my jacket, brushing ash from the sleeve. Maylin didn't let go of my hand. I looked straight at the camera lens, voice low, steady. "This wasn't a scandal," I said, "it was a cleansing." Then I turned away, Maylin's hand still wrapped in mine. We walked away from the wreckage, from the lies, from the name that had once been bigger than either of us. And maybe, just maybe, towards something better. But better doesn't always look the way you imagine. Hey, it's been 6 months. This morning, I drove through the city in a silver sedan that had no business being noticed. No tinted windows, no luxury trim, no lingering scent of old money. Just a car, like the man behind the wheel. The skyline had changed again, cranes dancing in slow motion above new steel bones. Autumn light filtered through the fog, casting everything in a quiet, golden calm. On the surface, the city had moved on, but certain wounds don't heal out loud. The news cycle had let go of our name. The explosion was declared a tragic accident during unauthorized renovations. The lawsuits were settled behind closed doors, sealed tight, no admissions of guilt, just money changing hands like it always has. Seraphine had taken a plea deal: conspiracy, securities fraud, obstruction. They housed her in a low-security facility on the edge of Napa Valley, the kind of place where fallen executives trade boardrooms for garden plots. She got 6 years. With good behavior, maybe 3. I visit her once a month. Not because she asks, and not because I've forgiven her. I go because ghosts deserve witnesses. Today, I brought Maylin with me. She sat beside me in the car, legs swinging slightly, earbuds in, but not playing anything. She's almost 12 now. Taller. Her voice has changed, softer somehow, but sharper when it counts. At the prison entrance, I handed over our IDs and waited while the guards cleared us. The facility was more spa than cell block. Redwood fences, rose bushes, meditation paths. But bars are bars, even when painted white. Seraphine met us in the garden. She looked smaller than I remembered. The kind of small that doesn't come from weight loss but from something deeper, like she'd been folded inward. Her hair was grayer at the temples, her posture slower, but her eyes still found mine with practiced sharpness. "You came," she said, almost surprised. "You're still my sister," I answered. "Even ghosts are family." She looked at Maylin and gave a faint smile. "You remind me of your uncle. You see too much." Maylin tilted her head, not blinking. "You didn't see enough." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Seraphine didn't flinch. She just nodded and looked down at her hands. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was honest. And that was new. We didn't stay long. The rules only allowed 30 minutes, and none of us filled the time with small talk. Before we left, Seraphine reached out, not to grab, just to touch Maylin's hand lightly. "Be better than us," she said. We left without answering. A week later, I found an envelope tucked between utility bills and charity mailers. No return address. but I knew the handwriting. Sanchez. Still recovering in Mexico, he'd found his own quiet corner of the world. His note was short. You were right. The truth wasn't the weapon. It was the cure. I read that line twice, then 3 times, then folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. Not to forget, but to preserve. Sometimes truth doesn't shout. It lingers, like salt in the air, or the ache in your ribs after a fall. I've sold off what remained of Quan Holdings. What didn't burn was dismantled piece by piece, legally, cleanly, permanently. In its place, I started something else, a foundation in my father's name, one dedicated to protecting whistleblowers, investigating corporate corruption, and helping those silenced by money speak again. It wasn't redemption, but it was direction. The first scholarship we awarded went to Maylene. She chose linguistics. Why language? I'd asked. To make sure people understand what's really being said, she replied with a shrug. I laughed. That was her grandmother all over again. Tonight, just before dusk, we walked the rebuilt pier together. The same stretch where she once called out my name and turned fate on its head. Wooden planks creaked under our feet, sea spray caught in the air, and boats bobbed quietly in the distance. She slipped her hand into mine, still small, still sure. That gesture, it carried everything. The warning, the faith, the thread that tied everything together. Uncle, she asked after a long pause, do you still have nightmares? I thought about lying, but I didn't. Sometimes, I said, but now I wake up before the explosion. She looked up, eyes wise beyond her age. That's because you learned to listen. We stood in silence as the sky turned gold, then amber, then blue. The tide rose below us, the rhythm of something older than any of this. And for the first time in a long while, I felt still. The fire didn't destroy me. It showed me what had already rotted and what could grow from the ashes. Trust doesn't rebuild like a house. It's earned again, one small promise at a time. The ghosts, they're still here, but they don't haunt. They remind me to pay attention, to speak when it counts, to never let silence win. And sometimes late at night, when the wind hits the glass just right, I still hear her whisper in Chinese, "Don't get in the car."